In this video, we're going to talk about two images that I made in last year's monsoon season. We'll discuss what I do like about them and what I feel like I could improve if I shot them again. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is Dylan Golby. In today's video, I want to talk about the two images that you see on the screen behind me here. These were made in last year's monsoon season, and I want to discuss them from the perspective of the decisions that I made, the things that I like about the images, the technical settings, but also things that I could improve if I went back and photographed these images again. We'll start with this first image of the Buddha statue and the waterfall from Hongnyeongsa in South Korea. Before I get to talking about the image, I'm going to put it on the screen, give you some time to think about it, and I'll give you the camera settings as well. And what I want you to think about before I actually start running you through what it is that I like and don't like about it is what decisions you think I might have made in terms of the camera settings, what decisions you think I might have made in terms of the composition, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, what you might have done to improve this image if you had have been there shooting it with me. So to give you a little bit of background on this shot, this is a spot that I'd been meaning to get to for quite a while. It's a small temple nestled in the mountains just north of Ulsan in South Korea, and I'd been waiting for, an opportunity to get there and also the right conditions. And I just wrapped up a commercial shoot down there with one of my clients, and I had a couple of days before I needed to get back to Seoul. And so myself and Roy Cruz, who was assisting me on that job, decided that we would go and visit this, despite the fact that the weather really didn't look like it was going to allow us to do so. So we actually almost turned back as we were driving down the highway because we literally couldn't see the cars in front of us. So what should have taken us, half an hour, 45 minutes to get to, ended up taking us about an hour and a half, and we very nearly turned back. So at this time of the year, with the monsoon in full force, there's just torrential rains absolutely all over the country. And it's not uncommon for us to have quite a few floods and to have a lot of low-hanging clouds around the mountains and things. It's a really moody time of year. It can be quite dangerous at times, but it can produce some really interesting images. And so when we arrived here, the monsoon rains had actually meant that the waterfall was an absolute torrent. It was just roaring off the mountain there. We could barely hear each other talking as we stood next to each other. And of course the rain was still falling, so we were being battered with these huge raindrops from the monsoon rains. Now I guess for some people that might be a situation that you may not want to get into, but for me, as somebody who grew up in a small countryside town in Australia and now lives in this sort of giant mega city that is Seoul, getting out into the countryside and just kind of feeling the force of Mother Nature a little bit is kind of a really calming experience for me. It's something that sort of just takes all of the other noise out of my mind and allows me to just relax and be a little bit. So for me, that's one of the things that I really wanted to express when I started working on this image, was that calm that I felt despite the absolute force of the rain and the waterfall and the wind around us. So I really don't think the conditions could have been any better. I mean, the pouring rain gave us so much water from the waterfall. We had this low-hanging cloud that was giving us a really sort of misty feeling to the image. It had all the mood that it needed to have. It was just me being able to decide how I was going to shoot that. Now, as I said, it makes me feel really calm to be in a situation like this, so I wanted to be able to express that with the image. Now, if I had to have chosen a shutter speed of, say, 1/250th of a second, that would have frozen all the water droplets in the air, and I would have had this sort of messy collection of water droplets all over, and it also would have frozen, or almost frozen, the falling water in the waterfall there. And so you would have seen a lot more power from the weather. You would have seen the sort of chaotic vibe, I guess the feeling that this scene had, but it wouldn't have expressed what I wanted to express. So that's definitely one of the things that I'm happy with about this image, is that I did choose a longer shutter speed to allow the raindrops to basically disappear and the waterfall to become a single streak. I also really love the light in this scene. Because of the cloudy day, we didn't have to deal with any of that dappling that you might get on a bright sunny day. We just had this omnidirectional wash coming down from above. And since we were sort of surrounded by trees and rocks, what we had was this sort of gap in the canopy that was just shining a beam of light down onto just the scene that we were trying to photograph. And what that allowed for was to basically evenly illuminate things, so dark things would remain dark, bright things would remain dark, and reflective things would reflect. And so with things like the Buddha statue, which is made from stone and it was covered in water, that would start to reflect. And the leaves also covered in water would start to reflect. And so we basically get exactly what your eyes would see. There was no difficult dynamic range to deal with or anything like that. The one thing that I did need to do in order to deal with this light was to add a polarizer to the front of my lens. And I'm really glad that I had it with me and that I did choose to use it, because the Buddha statue was a little bit shiny, the leaves were a little bit shiny, and if you see these two lanterns here, they also were facing the sky, and so the water on those meant that they would reflect the sky directly and they'd be significantly brighter than the rest of the scene. So using the polarizer, I was able to basically cut all the reflections off of these things and also off the leaves as well to make sure they remained green. Because the polarizer was able to take the sheen off the surfaces for me, I was actually able to draw your attention away from these lanterns up to the Buddha statue. And that, I feel, is one of the things that sort of saved me a little bit here, because I really do not like these two lanterns and the position they are in the composition. As you can see, the one on the left cuts directly through the waterfall, and the one on the right here is actually basically bisecting the Buddha statue here. And I would really have loved for those to be moved over to here and here, either side of the Buddha statue if I could. That way you'd be able to see the waterfall completely, and I'd also not be covering up any part of the Buddha statue. However, there were a couple of restrictions to how I could do that. There are a couple of ways I could have fixed it, but one wasn't really down to me, and the other one, we'll talk about in a second, that was pretty much my fault. The first thing that I could have done would be to step to the left a little bit. Now, unfortunately, there was a fence that prevented me from going too much further, but the second reason, and I think the real reason why I couldn't go further to the left and be able to include everything, was that I still really wanted to be able to include this little temple area here, and I only had the 32 to 64 millimeter for the GFX with me. Now, if I had the 23 millimeter, I could have taken a few steps more and still included this, but with the 32 millimeter focal length as wide as I could go, if I stepped any further and just got these, I would lose this building here, and I really didn't want to lose that. I feel like these three elements really give you a sense of where you are, and I didn't want to take any one of them out. The second thing that I could have done to improve this composition would have been to get up on the wet moss-covered rock behind me. There are some little grooves where people do climb up and get this shot, and I could have done it if I had have been wearing slightly more appropriate footwear. In the summer, I typically wear my EVA Birkenstocks, the little plastic shoes that water just sort of flows around and you don't have to worry about them getting wet or anything like that. However, they're not really great for climbing and sort of just general personal safety if you're going to be doing anything more than walking on a regular path. So if I had have had those, I could have got up above and just taken these two out of the composition and basically cut off at the bottom of the Buddha statue here. Next time. I know this now. I know where I have to go to get this shot. This was my first visit to the temple, and so I'll definitely have other shoes with me if I do decide to go back here in the monsoon season coming up. So that is the main thing that I feel like I could improve with this image. These two, I guess, are the only things that I feel really detract from this image, aside from maybe this little purple flower here that I could clone out. But that's not really a big deal. I feel like now that I've been there, I've got a better sense of what I would need in order to get a better image next time I go. But what do you guys think? What did you think was good or bad about this image? What would you improve? Can you think of any other way that I might have, improved this or got a bit of a different shot? On to the second shot. This is another image from another Buddhist temple in South Korea, this time in Gyeosan National Park. Now this scene I chanced upon and had to react pretty quickly, so I'll give you a chance again to take a look at it, have a think about the settings, have a think about the decisions I made, and then we'll get on to discussing it. This is another trip to another place that I'd been meaning to go to for a while, and again, everything lined up during the middle of the monsoon. I was working for the same client again, and again, my good friend Roy Cruz was there to assist me, and so we decided to take a one-day trip after the job this time around as well. And both of us had really been wanting to see the Tripitaka Koreana for a while, which is a set of Buddhist scriptures basically carved into wooden tablets and stored at one of the temples in this mountain complex. Unfortunately, that's no longer open to the public, just basically to save it from getting damaged. And so we were only able to look at it through the windows on the outside of the building. But what that did give us was the opportunity or the encouragement to go and explore some of the smaller temples surrounding that area. And it gave us the chance to photograph things that we may otherwise not have photographed. At this small temple, we were basically just walking around the grounds, making some shots of the architecture, making some shots of the beautiful trees that sort of overhang the temple and things like that, when I spotted the nun coming out to begin ringing the bell, as they do several times a day here. And I motioned over and I said, would it be okay if I took some photos? And I got a nod in response. And so I quickly put my GFX back in the bag and picked up the X100. Now, the GFX and the X100, I had the 45mm on the GFX and the 23 on the X100, so we're looking at pretty much the same focal length, they're equivalents. The GFX would arguably have given me superior image quality and possibly some better dynamic range to work with or something else like that. But for anyone who's used the GFX 50R, you will know that the shutter on that could possibly cause a small earthquake. The X100's shutter, on the other hand, is silent, and I wouldn't be disturbing what she was doing by using that camera. So I very quickly picked that up and started making the images with that. Now, I started with a couple of shots of her as she was ringing the bell, and I was happy with those. They were, something a bit different from what I was getting of just the architecture, but it wasn't until she started walking back towards the temple to go back inside that I found the frame that I thought I would really like to get. So as she was walking back, I was also walking back as well, as I needed to get further away. I really wanted to include both of the temple buildings coming together like this in a bit of a V and have the nun walking back across. I wasn't exactly sure where I would like to have her in the frame, but I knew that I wanted to catch that, I guess, that graceful soft motion as she sort of shuffled her way back towards the temple. So I ran back, got my position, held the camera up above my head. I think this might be the only time I've actually used the tilt screen on the X100V, as I had it up above my head and I tilted it back like this. Basically the reason for that is I wanted to try and keep the pillars of the temple straight, and since I was looking up at it, they would sort of begin to converge like this, and so if I could reduce that as much as possible on location, then I could sort of correct for it a little bit in Capture One when I got the images home. So I was holding it up like this, and as she walked through, I just click, 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 made a whole lot of different images to see which one would best express that slow, I guess, soft movement back towards the temple. So in the end, I had a lot of photos to be able to choose from. I think I shot about 25 in total of her moving around, some in this part of the temple here, some as she walked across, and some as she went in the door. But in the end, I really like the flow of the robes here and her foot just leaving the ground like that. This would be my favorite, but a close second would actually be this one. So other than being about double the height that I am and being able to keep those lines straight in camera, I think there are two things that I probably could have done better in this instance here. And the first would have been to actually include the end of the roof here. There's only, maybe 2% or 3% of that roof cut off, and I feel like if I'd turned the camera just a little bit, I could have kept that, and it would have allowed you to, I guess, just be a little bit more comfortable with that edge of the edge of the frame. But again, that could be personal. I might be overreacting a little bit to it, just knowing that I could have done it. Could have been a little bit of that fear of missing out. Let me know what you think in the comments. But I feel like if the end of the roof was there, just that little going up, it would have been a much more effective composition. And the second thing would have been to have a polarizer at the ready. And the reason for that is because of the monsoon again, the roof tiles are quite wet and the trees are quite wet. And so you lose a little bit of that depth of color in the greens, so you'll see they go a little bit gray as they're reflecting the sky. And also this roof, I think I had to fight a little bit with the exposure, because underneath here versus the roof tiles that are facing up, the exposure difference is just absolutely huge. So if I could have cut a little bit of the sheen off that just by turning a polarizer a little bit, I feel like I could have improved just the focus, getting you back here, and improved the overall contrast in the image. But I didn't have one on, and I think I would rather have this photo than have missed it because I was trying to screw a polarizer on. So again, I'd like to hear in the comments if you guys like this image at all. If so, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What do you think maybe I could have done differently to improve it? Personally, I feel like if I'd taken a step back and a step to the left, I could have, included the end of the roof, got a bit more of a diagonal line going on here, just overall improved the composition. I also feel like a polarizer might have improved it a little bit, but otherwise I think the settings were pretty much fine for what I was trying to achieve. I've got plenty of depth of field here, and my exposure is good. But what would you have done? Would you perhaps have moved to a different location, tried a different angle, maybe chosen some different settings? I'd love to hear your thoughts about those things in the comments. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch the video. I hope that what I have to share is educational, and if not, at least a little bit entertaining for you. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up below. If you haven't subscribed already, I really would appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one.